Is a $300 camera able to stand up against a $1,200 camera? Let's find out. I love doing that. What's up everyone, I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. On Monday, I released my initial impressions video of the 4-year-old Sony A5100, which I purchased used from Best Buy for $300. My overall initial impressions is this is a really nice little camera, capable of very good image quality with a huge sensor and a flip-up screen. Man, I wish more Sony cameras had this flip-up screen. Maybe like the RX100 VI. And as my hunt for the perfect B camera continues, forever it appears, I will never be free of this Sisyphean task. Let's see if the brand new Sony 1-inch censored point and shoot completely overshadows the older, bigger censored mirrorless camera. Now let's break this video down into a few parts. First up, let's talk about the physical differences. Both cameras are actually pretty evenly sized. I don't know whether that means the RX100 is too big for a point and shoot or that the A5100 is amazingly small. I think they both end up being a really awesome size for a travel camera. It is really easy to put both inside of my camera bag and just get going. Handling wise, the A5100 is much easier to hold in the hand as it's actually shaped like a small mirrorless camera. Whereas the RX100 VI is a smooth bodied camera that is kind of awkward to hold the same way. It doesn't have the same hand grips that the A5100 has. Both do have a flip up screen to enable those of us that spend the majority of our time in front of the camera not to have to bring a bunch of extra crap with us when we want to do mobile filmmaking. Cough cough, A7 III setup. The VI screen can fully articulate up, but it can also articulate 90 degrees down, giving you the ability to more easily capture video that does not require the camera to be at eye level. The A5100 on the other hand only flips straight up, so it's a little less versatile, but something that I like about the A5100 screen is when it's fully up, you can see the settings of the camera along the bottom of the screen, whereas the bottom lip of the RX100 screen is blocked, so you can't actually see if your shutter speed is correct when you're in front of the camera. That happens to me all the time, that it's off just a little bit. I can't tell on the RX100. And neither camera has an audio in jack, which kind of stinks. The RX100 VI has a viewfinder and the A5100 doesn't. I mean, I never used the viewfinder, but I'd figure somebody would want to hear that and I'd get an angry comment going, hey, we use the viewfinder, you should have left a comment about it. So that's my comment for trying to head off some of those angry comments. You can never get rid of all of them, but you know, it has a viewfinder. Another big physical difference that I didn't really consider until I started using both cameras on a regular basis, the flip-up screens themselves. Not all flip-up screens are created equal, apparently. The screen on the RX100 VI is beautiful. It's really easy to see what the camera is recording, and you can feel confident if it's good looking on the screen, it's going to be good looking in the final product that you pull off your SD card. The A5100 is not like that. The flip-up screen is not the highest quality, and it's harder to nail your exposure because sometimes it looks like there is much more noise in the image than there actually is. I have ruined a few of my clips from being underexposed because I thought there was just too much noise in the image, and there actually wasn't. It's just the screen is crazy low res. So you can use it to frame up your shot and see what's in focus. It's not really dependable for exposure. And the last physical difference I want to mention is the RX100 VI does have more manual buttons, which allows for an easier time getting your settings dialed in. It has the function dial, it has the function button, and this allows for easy changing of settings. We'll talk about that a little more here later. The A5100 only has the function scroll wheel, and it doesn't have a function button at all. It's not a deal breaker, but more buttons and dials generally make it easier to get what you want out of the camera. Next up, let's talk about video recording modes. The RX100 VI can record in up to 4K 30 frames per second, and it can do 1080p up to 240 frames per second. It has a beautiful 24 to 200 millimeter lens built into it, making it an excellent all-in-one package. The A51 on the other hand is a little more limited in the recording options. I mean, it is 4 years older and I got it for a fourth of the cost. It can record in 1080p up to 60 frames per second, so usable, but I mean, it is still pretty limited. It is a Sony E-mount mirrorless camera, so it has a huge amount of lenses that can fit to it, giving it an impressively versatile set of focal ranges you can get. Another benefit of the point and shoot is it has the ability to use Sony's picture profiles, including S-Log settings and the new Sony HLG HLG profile. Even though I don't really do any post-production grading on my video, the HLG is an impressive little feat for increasing the dynamic range out of the camera. You can do some pretty crazy recovery off of that. The A5100 doesn't have any picture profiles included, so it's really easy to cover in this section. It just doesn't have it. Let's talk about the image quality itself. And the A5100 has a much larger APS-C size sensor. Larger sensors do give you a few key advantages. One, since it has a larger surface area, more light can hit it. And two, again with the light this time, the more light on the sensor, the easier it is to achieve a shallower depth of field with an equivalent aperture rating. So the 5100 is much better in low light. And you know, both cameras have pretty good image quality. I prefer the image colors out of the RX100 Mark VI. I think the new Sony color science is really good, and I'm absolutely on board with what they've got going on here. Plus, like I already mentioned, you can customize the in-camera image a lot since you have the ability to access the Sony picture profiles. However, it's not a fully one-sided battle here. I much prefer the low light capability of the A5100, and again, this comes down to the sensor size. We've talked about this before, but I really like having more dynamic lighting in studio, and I don't always get perfect lighting situations when I'm out and about making videos. So having a larger sensor is a pretty big benefit for me. So this section is really gonna come down to your personal preference, low light versus straight up beautiful image quality. Okay, and this is a very quick low light / audio test of the two cameras. So this is the image and the audio coming out of the Sony RX100 Mark VI, audio test 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is the audio / image quality coming out of the Sony A5100, audio test 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the exact same setup, the exact same lighting that we've seen in the rest of the video from my Sony A7 III. So this is just kind of how, like, if I were to use this to record one of my YouTube videos, what would the image quality look like? I think they both do okay in lighted situations, but I do think the A5100 handles low light way better than the RX100 Mark VI. Like I said earlier, the RX100 Mark VI has a much smaller sensor, so it's kind of just how it works. They both do have really good autofocus. Okay, back to the video. And last but certainly not least, one of the most important aspects of gear in my mind is ease of use. Sony, in general, has a reputation of being one of the hardest menu systems to use, and in all honesty, it is a lot more fiddly than using a Panasonic or Canon camera. But recently, Sony's made a concerted effort in making their menu systems much more logically laid out and easier to navigate. The RX100 Mark VI has the benefit of having the newest Sony menu system that's laid out really well, and even if it's not what you want, you have my menu that will let you create your very own frequently used items list. Plus, you can go into the recording menu to change up the physical buttons themselves to make it even easier to set the camera up however you want. And then we've got the A5100. Now, the A5100 was released in 2014, right in the middle of the Sony menu system, you know, being terrible, and yeah, it's pretty bad. The menus are all laid out like it's for a beginner, but they hide really important settings deep into those lists, and that is a pretty terrible user experience. Not only that, but it has very few physical buttons, so you are forced to dig into those systems to change something simple like the white balance. Yeah, it's pretty terrible, and I'm somebody that's used to the Sony menu systems. I've been using them for a long time. So what, right? So at the end of the day, does the much cheaper, much older camera stand up to the future? And yeah, I really think it does. Obviously, there are some legitimate functions and settings that the A5100 is missing. It doesn't have 4K, it doesn't have picture profiles, it only has 60 frames per second for slow motion, and it overheats faster than the RX100 Mark VI. That's crazy, I know. But I only paid $300 for the A5100, and at that price, it has a flip-out screen just like the RX, it has awesome autofocus just like the RX, it has a much larger sensor, and it has the ability to take any of the Sony E-mount lenses. And for like an additional $200, I can buy a lens to have farther reach than the RX100 Mark VI. Yes, it has problems, but I am legitimately shocked at how much I like the A5100. Don't get me wrong, as an all-in-one package, the RX100 Mark VI is a fantastic camera. But if you are looking for something to create online content, it is really hard for me to argue against the A5100. Thanks for watching.